Is this morning's verse text 39? Yes. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Text 39, Canto 3, Chapter 24. Mam Atmanam Swayam Jyoti Sarvabhuta Gahashayam Atmanyevatmana Viksha Vishoko Bhayam Richasi Mam Atmanam Swayam Jyotihi Sarva Bhuta Gahashayam Atmanyevatmana Viksha Vishoko Bhayam Richasi Mam Atmanam Swayam Jyoti Sarvabhuta Gahashayam Atmanyevatmana Viksha Vishoko Bhayam Richasi Mam Atmanam Swayam Jyotihi Sarvabhuta Gahashayam Mam Atmanam Swayam Jyoti. Ladies, Mam, me, Atmanam, the Supreme Soul or Paramatma, Swayam Jyotihi, self-effulgent, Sarvabhuta, of all beings, Guha, in the hearts, Ashayam, dwelling, Atmani, in your own heart, Eva, indeed, Atmana, through your intellect, Viksha, always seeing, always thinking, Vishokaha, free from lamentation, Abhayam, fearlessness, Richasi, you will achieve. Translation, in your own heart, through your intellect, you will always see me, the supreme, self-effulgent soul, dwelling within the hearts of all living entities. Thus, you'll achieve the state of eternal life, freed from all lamentation and fear. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. People are very anxious to understand the absolute truth in various ways, especially by experiencing the Brahmajyoti or Brahman effulgence by meditation and by mental speculation. But Kapila Deva uses the word Mam to emphasize that the personality of Godhead is the ultimate feature of the absolute truth. In Bhagavad Gita, the personality of Godhead is always says Mam unto me. But the rascals misinterpret the clear meaning. Mam is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. If one can see the Supreme Personality of Godhead as he appears in different incarnations and understand that he has not assumed a material body, but is present in his own eternal spiritual form, then one can understand the nature of the personality of Godhead. Since the less intelligent cannot understand this point, it is stressed everywhere again and again, simply by seeing the form of the Lord as he presents himself by his own internal potency as Krishna or Rama or Kapila. One can directly see the Brahmajyoti, because the Brahmajyoti is no more than the effulgence of his bodily luster. Since the sunshine is the luster of the sun planet, by seeing the sun, one automatically sees the sunshine. Similarly, by seeing the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one simultaneously sees and experiences the Paramatma feature, as well as the impersonal Brahman feature of the Supreme. Paragraph. The Bhagavatam has already enunciated that the absolute truth is present in three features. In the beginning as the impersonal Brahman, in the next stage is Paramatma in everyone's heart, and at last as the ultimate realization of the absolute truth, Bhagavan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. One who sees the Supreme Person can automatically realize the other features, namely the Paramatma and Brahman features of the Lord. The words used here are Vishoko Payam Richasi. Simply by seeing the personality of Godhead, one realizes everything, and the result is that one becomes situated on the platform where there is no lamentation and no fear. This can be attained simply by devotional service to the personality of Godhead. Something that I spoke yesterday evening, I want to add a little addition to what I spoke yesterday evening. Yesterday evening, we were at Harmony Collective, and towards the beginning, I said something incomplete. I had heard in a class where Prabhupada was explaining why he added Godhead to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And I said half, but I want to say the other half. Half is Prabhupada was emphasizing, he said, he wanted to emphasize the personal feature. A second was, and because there's many conceptions of God, and the personal conception of God is underscored by saying personality of Godhead. The second explanation, which I neglected to mention yesterday, was while there are Ishwaras, or gods, there's one who's the controller of all controllers. So the Supreme Personality of God, head, he's the head of all Ishwaras. Parama, Ishwara, or Godhead. So In the purport, Prabhupada is making reference to an important verse, very important verse from Canto 1, Chapter 2, where, as he says, it was been already stated that the absolute truth, the first part of that verse is the absolute truth is in the non-dual territory or non-dual substance. Non-dual means in contrast with this place, because this is the place of duality and transcendence, or the realm of the absolute, that there's no duality, advayam. And that the learned persons, the tattva-vid personalities, they understand this non-dual advayam realm as having three features: Brahman, Paramatma, Bhagavan. So what's stated in the purport, with reference to that verse, is when there's realization of Bhagavan, implicit or a subset of that realization is the other two realizations. And as I was reading this, I was thinking, and the opposite is not true. One may have realization of Brahman, one may have realization of Paramatma, but it doesn't mean that by realization of Brahman, one has realized the other two. Or by realization of Paramatma, one has realized the other two. But by realization of Bhagavan, one has realized the other two. That is to say, it's complete. Although they're all of the Advaya nature, this personality of Godhead, or the supreme feature, Godhead, because they're all, one can say Brahman is a feature of God, Paramatma is a feature of God, and Bhagavan is a feature of God. But Bhagavan feature is Godhead, because with this realization of the personal feature includes realization of the others. So back to the verse is mentioning specifically the Jyoti, Swayam Jyoti, Mam Atmanam Swayam Jyoti, Swayam Jyoti, the effulgence from himself, Swayam Jyoti. Swayam means his own, Jyoti. So the Brahma Jyoti is his effulgence. And the Atmanam, that's the super soul feature. Now, when Kardama Muni, because the scene is Kardama Muni is getting the blessing of his son, the personality of Godhead, is giving his blessing to return to the forest and engage in the process for that age. Satya Yoga is the process of meditation. Meditation on what? If one is not a follower of the Vedas, meditation can mean so many things. And many people do meditation. It means so many things. Without listing, it's a long list. And there's techniques of meditation, and people like the techniques of meditation because there's a feel-good experience, or when the mind becomes less agitated and more settled by meditating on whatever. I remember very early, when I was exploring what meditation was, there was all kinds of meditation on a mandala, and meditation on a spot, and meditation on a blank wall. This was Zazen, meditation on a blank wall, like emptying your thoughts, and that's meditation. And then there's supposedly the stage that comes when you're meditating on a blank. It's Satori is called. It's like the realization of light. Light from what? Well, if you're a follower of Buddhism, it's not from what? There's no from what. It's just that's it. Anyway, real meditation is meditation on the Supreme Personality of Godhead in his fullness. So that's being disclosed here. He, Kapila Dev, is instructing his father, who is his devotee, that he, Kapila Dev, Kardamuni, will achieve the stage where his mind is completely fixed on these three features. No, not that he's not fixed on these three features, because there he is in front of him. And Kardamuni is not just, a sadhaka. He's a perfected personality. So he's seeing and has realization of these three features. So they're being explicitly spoken. Mam Atmanam Swayam Jyoti Sarva Bhuta. All living entities have this feature of Guha. Guha means in the heart. Actually, Guha means hidden, like a cave is a Guha. Like, in Ramayana, Guha lived in the forest. So, Guha. In the hearts, Ashayam, dwelling in the heart. So who's that? That's Paramatma feature. So he, Kapila Dev, is indicating to Kardamuni that you will achieve that. Atmanyevatmana viksha. Viksha, seeing or thinking. And by that absorption in transcendence, then vishoka, shoka means lamentation, vishoka, no lamentation. And bhaya means fear, and abhaya means no fear. So what does that mean? It means in this realm of duality, there's duality. There's happiness and there's distress. Harsha shoka. Happiness and distress. And abhayam and bhayam. There's actually no abhayam because that's just smoke or cosmetic. A foolish person, I have no fear. And it's a foolish person. Foolish person in the sense that when one is attached not to transcendence, but to the body, then there's fear. It's a bluff. Have no fear. Now, when Krishna says to Arjuna, Ma Suchaha, then that's substantial. Have no fear. Abhayam. When Kapila Dev says to Kardamuni, Abhayam, it's substantial. He's benedicting him with that condition of being beyond duality. Now, Kardama Muni is very qualified. Even for the most qualified, there's two parts. There's the qualification, and there's the recipient, the receiving mercy. And receiving mercy comes through, in our case, through disciplic succession. And in his case, he's receiving mercy directly from the Supreme Person. Or Kapila Dev is acting as his guru, and giving instructions, and giving blessings, and imparting fearlessness and freedom from lamentation, access to transcendence. So it's a short verse, but it's in one sense, it's very comprehensive. And the whole response, the whole series of verses, this section, this nice section. When there's passages in the Bhagavatam, when the Supreme Lord is pleased with someone, just like yesterday evening, we were hearing the description of the exchange between Muchakunda and Krishna in the cave, in Muchakunda's cave. And the Supreme Lord was giving benedictions and blessings and so many things. He was revealing clearly who he was, because when Muchukunda saw him, he saw the effulgence, and he understood behind that effulgence there's a person. But who are you? And the Supreme Lord gave him this is who I am. And, in a very full picture, not complete, but a full picture of who he is. He had descended from the spiritual world into this world at the request of Mother Earth, who was overburdened with demoniac kings. And I've given you the service of annihilating one of them. Kalyabhata was a big demon. So Muchukunda did a little assist. And Krishna, so my point was, Krishna is speaking to Muchukunda, disclosing things, and also not just making, may the day come when you achieve. He was just declaring, the day will come when you will achieve. Like, that's the mercy. He was empowering. That doesn't mean there's nothing left to do on Muchukunda's side, or here there's nothing left to do on Kardamuni's side. Although one can say Kardamuni wasn't just a sadhaka. He was a perfected soul. So what's there to be further achieved by a perfected soul? Well, it's not like once upon a time I achieved perfection and then I relax or become complacent, or there's nothing left to do. I can just twiddle my thumbs and say Haribol and everything's okay. So there's a continued interaction of submission and mercy, or service with submission and mercy. There's an ongoing relationship between a devotee and the personality of Godhead, and there's no end to it. There's no checking out of that dynamic, that loving relationship experience, or becoming complacent. There's no complacency in the dynamic of spiritual life. This is a topic that was discussed yesterday. I was thinking again on the way home. Prabhupada's statement is, we're either progressing or regressing. There's no standing still. So complacency is standing still. There's no complacency. If you're standing still, you're regressing. Or if you're situated with steadiness in some position, one must be anticipating progression, or progressing in my Krishna consciousness. Doesn't mean necessarily do more or spin faster or something like that. It's an increase of Krishna consciousness. And there are ways of increasing one's Krishna consciousness, and one is always enthusiastic to accept things that are favorable for bhakti, and always opportunity. Just like today is the appearance day of Bhakti Siddhanta. So it's auspicious. So one of the things we do is we fast. Wait a minute. Why do you fast? Because that doesn't sound fun. But it's increasing it's at least the intention is to diminish bodily, honor the great personality, Bhakti Siddhanta, and the positive. Hear something about him, remember him, offer something to him, including the sacrifices, not just so I can get something. It's honoring the transcendental personality. Somebody sent me a little YouTube, short, but a YouTube presentation by one devotee, Dhruva Maharaj Prabhu. And he put together a little video that's showing some images along with Prabhupada's a class that Prabhupada gave some years ago, where he is describing his Vyasa Puja offering to Bhakti Siddhanta from 1930, whatever it was, 36, I think. And Prabhupada's explaining the poetry. And with explaining the poetry comes his feelings and the mood of taking shelter of feelings towards Bhakti Siddhanta. And it's poetic. Prabhupada said in this little talk that from that time he was given the name poet. Poet means kavi, or it's one of the 26 qualities of a devotee. Is found in Chaitanya Charitamrita as poetic, kavi. So Prabhupada became known as kavi, or poet. And sure enough, so much of his writing wasn't just then, but the idea is thinking of Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur. He also wrote many cases, very, very strong teachings on different subject matters. At the same time, he was poetic in his doing so. Poetic doesn't necessarily mean something that rhymes, like this Vyasa Puja offering that Srila Prabhupada presented to Bhakti Siddhanta. It was in English, and it was rhyming. Adore ye, O happy day. Blessed in heaven, sweeter than May. But it rhymes. Some poetry rhymes. But there's also expressions that are necessarily rhyming type of poetry. It's something that has other types of literary ornaments where, like, for example, metaphor, where something that's known is giving a directional hint of something that's unknown. That's a literary ornament, is poetic. Something that's known, like one of Prabhupada's examples is, when you're pointing to the moon and somebody doesn't see the moon, you point to a tree and see in the branches of the tree over there, that's where the moon is. Oh. But the moon isn't in the branches of a tree. But you look at the tree, you can see the tree, and then maybe you can see the moon in the far, far distance that looks as if it's in the branches of the tree. But it's not. So, similarly, poetic expressions are not necessarily rhyming poetry. To explain transcendence, one must be a poet. That is, something that's known to help us understand something that's beyond our recognition, that's unknown. It's very common for a transcendentalist to describe something that's unknown through the medium of something that's known. It's that way. It's not the same. It's not to one, but it's in that direction. If you want to understand this feature or that feature of transcendence, contemplate something that's known. And then gives you directionally at least the sense of the unknown. But when the unknown is revealed, it has features that are not within the realm of duality. One of the books that I have in my library is a book entitled Search for Truth. I was making some reference to this search for truth some years ago with Bhakti Vikash Maharaj. And he said, "Where's that book?" And I said, "It's in my library." He said, "Oh, that must be one of the Gaudiya Maths took things from his writings and published it under that title, Search for Truth." Because when you're searching for truth, it's unknown. Transcendental truth is unknown. So poetic language is needed to disclose that which is beyond the senses, or adhoksaja, like in the language of the Bhagavatam. Using the senses to serve the master of the senses, who's beyond the senses. How do you serve one who's beyond the senses using the senses? If he's beyond the senses, how can you do that? That's part of the mystery of bhakti, but it's the nature of bhakti. So Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur gave such teachings again and again and again, like Srila Prabhupada, relentlessly again and again. As he's stating in this purport, sometimes things are repeated because it's necessary to understand them, and the stubborn mind doesn't want to go there because we're holding on to something that's known rather than letting go so that we can go to that which is not yet known. So it's repeated to help us understand A, it's important, and B, what is it? When it's repeated and repeated, then slowly that which is not known, at least the glimmer, can be understood, because the sound vibration, transcendental sound vibration, is purifying, and the whole of the Bhagavatam has that nature. And so we like to read Bhagavatam in our temples every morning all around the world, and expand it to people reading Bhagavatam in their reading groups, and distribute sets of Bhagavatam and flood the world with the Srimad Bhagavatam's transcendental message. See if there's some discussion. You're taking over, huh? Good luck. There's so many wires.
Maharaj, in the beginning, when you were describing Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan, I heard that if somebody is Brahman realized, it doesn't imply that they've realized the other two. If somebody is Brahman and Paramatma, if somebody has realized Paramatma, it doesn't imply that they've realized the other two.
It means that they don't understand Bhagavan.
Okay. I just wanted to clarify that.
That's-
So they
that's-
have realized Brahman if they
Yes.
realized Brahman, right?
Yes.
Okay. And then,
So my point was, Bhagavan is at the pinnacle, and it includes the others, and we can't make the same statement about the others. That was my point.
and then I've had this doubt in the past, and I think you've even answered it, but I wanted to just clarify it, my understanding that when we talk about, like how you said, complacent means we're regressing because there's no standing still.
Right.
And I sometimes have a hard time understanding what regressing or like falling down means in bhakti, because bhakti can never be taken away. So
It gets covered, that's all.
Okay. Yeah,
That's
just-
falling down, it gets covered. The soul is covered. The soul is Satchitananda Vigraha. But it gets covered. That's falling down. You get more covered, that's falling down. And advancing is getting less covered, less covered. It doesn't, what the soul is doesn't change, just the covering like the discussion yesterday, in proportion to, or proportionately, the soul is covered, more covered, less covered.
Hey Krishna Maharaj, thank you for wonderful class. Um, Maharaj, I was contemplating on your last point that you made about we as you know neophyte devotees, that is talking about myself, trying to serve master of senses through senses, and who's beyond senses. Um, Maharaj, is that the reason a lot of time most of the time we don't really understand whether we are actually serving when we are serving him, because that's the only way for us to perceive his reciprocation through our senses, because that's all we have. I mean, like how to really understand that we are serving the right way. We are, because that's all we have, right? We have our senses. That's all we have. That too, we can't control fully them anyway.
What are the symptoms that we're serving nicely? By what symptom? By using Prabhupada's word, characteristics. By what characteristics can we understand that we're actually serving? That's your question? Yes? Well, just this morning, I was hearing Srila Prabhupada giving the answer. I'll repeat what Prabhupada said. He gave two answers. One you're familiar with, most likely. Bhakti parishano bhavo viraktir anyatra shyat. You familiar with that verse? No? The verse, it's in the Bhagavatam. It says, using a metaphor, something known to understand something unknown. So then something known is after fasting and you break the fast, three things happen. Strength comes again to the body, hunger subsides, and at some point you say, no, thank you, I don't need anything more. So similarly, as with eating after having fasted, so similarly, by the process of hearing, three things. What are those three things? Bhakti, Paraisha Anubhav, and Viraktir Anyatra. Syat means arises. So detachment from other things, the negation part, and then the positive part. Bhakti, the desire to serve. That's, how do I know if I'm hearing properly or, I'm actually advancing? The desire to serve is growing. And para isha anubhav, feelings. Keep it simple. Feelings for para isha. I want to serve, and the object of service, I have awakened, heightened, loving feelings, and detachment from other things. That was one of his two answers. The other of his two answers was making reference to the 26 qualities mentioned in Chaitanya Charitamrita, which Prabhupada puts in a purport from Canto 2, Chapter 3. He lists them, and then the explanation Prabhupada was giving is, those are characteristics, using that word again, of the soul. They're already there, they're just covered. And as the soul becomes diminished in its covering, then those characteristics manifest. So a symptom of one has become advanced, or one is advancing, is those characteristics shine naturally. As the covering is removed, the characteristics of the soul come out instead of being covered. So that's something you can do, or each of us can do, is to see, look at the list of those 26, and how well are we doing? No, lesser or greater, something. And that's a symptom that those characteristics are being manifest naturally. Or say conversely, if those symptoms or characteristics are not manifest, then one isn't advancing so nicely. And then, the teaching of those 26, one is primary or swarup lakshana, and the others are marginal or tatastha lakshana. So focus on the primary, and the secondary ones become manifest. So there are two answers to your question. There's self-evaluation. You can, ask your wife. Or ask your guide or mentor or, a dear friend, some wise person. Can you, I'm coming to you to seek some verification. What do you see? Because in many cases, people that are close to you and are well-wishers and are wise, they can see things that we don't necessarily see. So that's a third. Self-evaluation and, well-wishing, critical evaluation. Critical doesn't mean in the negative sense. It means in the empirical sense.
Maharaj, once again, thank you for such a wonderful, enlightening class. Was just introspecting on complacency, Maharaj. It's a continuous struggle. Complacency at one level, one realizes I have to go above, and then you go above. Like for an example, if you're reading for 15 minutes, you go to 30 minutes. This is a little more. But after a certain period of time, that also becomes a complacency. So you have to grow more. Like you said, we cannot be stagnant. We always want to move.
Well, yeah, I'm going to interrupt and say it's not just quantitative, it's qualitative.
Yeah.
Not how many minutes. And that's the measure of you doing more.
Correct. This is just an example, Maharaj. How do I know that I'm complacent now, even when I went to the next zone from a quality perspective?
Well, here's my simple answer to that. Just assume there's complacency. A reasonable assumption is I'm not yet a pure devotee. And so to some extent it's there. And sometimes more, sometimes less, but it's there. So now, once you've understood it's there, now what? You're vigilant. And you go to Rupa Goswami's teaching that says utsaha. That's not complacency. Looks like we're done. Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai.
Hare Krishna, Dandavat Pranams, all glories, Guru Maharaj. Thank you very much.